Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending our Power Meter webinar. We're so excited to show our new innovative Power Meter and the awesome configuration software that we've built for this product. My name is Michael Joseph. I'm the marketing manager here at Setra Systems. I'm joined by Tom Lish. Tom is our product manager for our energy management and our Power Meter line of products. He'll be sharing with you today a little bit about the features and functionality of our new Power Meter. If we have time, we'll also get into the software configuration tool, which if you haven't seen yet, that is a must see. It's just so easy, designed for 2021. We'll have time for Q&A after the session ends. If we have to go a little bit long, feel free to stay with us. I'll be respectful of everyone's time. This webinar is recorded and it will be made available shortly after the webinar concludes. I also want to remind everyone that we have our 2021 product showcase going on right now. Obviously, without being able to do virtual trade shows right now, we'd be at our expo. We wanted to put out another way for our customers and those who know Setra to see what we've been working on over the last year. So please feel free to sign up for that if you haven't already. The Power Meter from Setra is a networked revenue-grade power meter built on a versatile and powerful platform designed to meet the high demands for any sub-metering application. It's available in 3, 12, and 48 load configurations, and the meter includes an enclosure and an intuitive web portal interface. The Power Meter is about 2 years old now, and it's been absolutely loved by all the customers that have switched from our old meters and those who have purchased the new one. So without any further ado, I'll pass it on to Tom and he'll get us started. Take it away, Tom.
All right, thanks, Mike. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we're happy to show you Setra's Power Meter that we launched in early 2020, and hope you guys like some of the features we've built into it, and look forward to any application or any one-on-one sessions on the software or meter. Please feel free to put any questions in the questions and comments, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And anyone who needs a private demo or quotes or working on a project, please feel free to put that in there as well. And either myself or a member of our sales team will respond right away to your request, and we'll work with you on any upcoming projects. So first thing, I want to give a high-level overview of the Setra Power Meter family. So the Setra Power Meter is comprised of a 3, 12, and 48 load power meter. What this means is there's 3 CT inputs, 12 CT inputs, or 48 CT inputs on each one of these meters, and they can be configured in any configuration that you have out there for 3-phase or single-phase configurations in either Y or Delta, or even split phase for some of the residential type loads. The only difference is the 3 and the 12 are in a smaller form fit package due to the less CTs that you're going to be connecting to the meter. So the 3 and the 12 are on the left side image, and to the right of that is the 48 load meter. That'll be a little bit larger enclosure to accommodate the extra CTs, as well as give you room to land some wiring in there. As you have more and more loads and are measuring more and more things, unfortunately you need more and more space for wires that are going to go in there. So we try to accommodate that within our package based on some feedback from people out in the field. To the right of our 2 meters, you'll see our Rogowski coils. We have those in a 12-inch, 24-inch, and a 36-inch length. Rough diameters are 3.5, 7.5, and 11.5 inches in diameter, respectively. These are ideal for odd-shaped cable bundles or bus bar loads, and the 12-inch goes up to 1,500 amps, the 24-inch goes up to 3,000 amps, and the 36 up to 6,000 amps. To the right of those are more traditional split core CTs. Those CTs we carry in 20, 50, 100, 200, and 400 amps. And then from there, people will usually transition over to the Rogowski coils for the higher amperage range. Our split core CTs are UL 2808 listed, and they also come with a 15-foot cable length, which should meet most of the cable runs you may have in the field, but both the split core CTs and Rogalski coils can be extended in the field for longer runs. Some of the highlights of the meter are the easy USB configuration. All the meters have a USB on the front located on the user interface underneath the display. And with that, you can set up the meter through its onboard web portal software. The meter itself acts like a web server. So you can use any of your common Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox, whatever your favorite browser is, you can ping the meter through a static IP through that USB connection. With that, once connected, you can clone features. So if you have a bunch of meters that are set up that have similar setups across a large campus, you can copy and paste those settings from meter to meter. And you can also download data and use that for data transfer from the USB as well. With our meters, one thing that was important to us is to limit the amount of SKUs people had to carry in inventory or remember to buy. So with that, we tried to pack everything that we could into one SKU for the 3, one SKU for the 12, and one SKU for the 48. And with that, you can field select CTs, whether they're split core, Rogalski, or even existing CTs that you may have out in the field up to 2 volts. You can configure those CT inputs for. All meters have BACnet and Modbus native to each meter in each part number, and they're also come standard via Ethernet or RS-485 for both those protocols. With that, you also have a pulse output that you can tie to an accumulating value. The meter will also solve that age-old problem of data logging and backing up your data. So if your comms ever go down, you have a backup of that energy data that you can download from the meter and see what happened while the comms were down. So if the comms went down Friday night and no one noticed till Monday, you'd be able to gather that energy and power information that occurred over that weekend. The broadband line power, both the 12 and 48 load meter come standard with a dual voltage input, meaning you can have 2 different service levels, which greatly helps when you do multi-load metering across a large array of voltages. So you can have one voltage input at 120 volts and you can have one at 477 and tie the appropriate CTs to that wiring configuration and gather that data. So it's almost like having 2 power meters in one unit. Each one of those voltage inputs operates from 80 to 600 volts, plus or minus 10%, giving you a wide range. So again, you don't have to buy a meter rated for 277 volts or 480 volts. You can meet those demands all through configuration of software, and the meter will handle that wide range of voltage. The meter is also ANSI 12.20 class 0.2. So very accurate meter and will meet most of the accuracy demands out there in the field. When we pull back the cover, just to highlight some of the features that we talked about, when you pull back the cover on the 3 and the 12, you'll see the CT inputs to the left and right of the display. You'll either have 3 or 12, depending on the model that you ordered. You'll have a USB configuration, so this is a close-up of that connection. You'll have your single pole double throw alarm relay, RS-485 communication terminal block, your RJ-45 Ethernet connection, earth ground screw terminal. You'll have some pulse I/O. So we'll have 2 pulse inputs and 1 pulse output. The inputs you can tie to a water meter, a gas meter, and accumulate those values and get those up to your whatever preferred protocol, be it Modbus or BACnet. You also have user interface keys, a status LED that will indicate locally alarms, as well as a 4-line display that'll be backlit so you can navigate some of the high-level information data right there at the meter without having to log in. Moving from left to right, if you look at the 48 load meter, towards the top, everything is the same as the 3 and the 12. There's just more CTs and some more processing power in the background. But to the customer, the user experience and the installation procedure is exactly the same. So once you learn one meter, you'll be able to use the other. Some of the installation basics. So how this meter would get installed is there's a rear housing, and you can see the two red terminal blocks for your voltage inputs. You would install this to the wall, and then you'd bring your high voltage to those red terminal blocks, either 1 or 2. You'd snap in the PCBA frame assembly. That's the brains of the meter. That'll cover up those voltage inputs, as well as then you can land your CT wiring and all your communications, and then slap the cover on for the front to seal off the installation, and then begin collecting data on your BAS or energy management software. This picture shows an installation at Setra. So this is of the Setra clean room panel. So we're monitoring the panel to the right of the 48 power meter. And we're monitoring all the breakers within that panel. I think there's 36 points that we're measuring within there, 36 different loads. And if you look to the right, those of you who may be familiar with our old Setra Power Patrol that we used to carry, that's in this smallish pan here, the square panel. And it's not much smaller than the 48 load meter, but now you're getting so much more data and so much more granularity within that clean room versus before we used to just know how much power the clean room was consuming. Now we can measure it down to basically plug loads in that inside of that room, in that manufacturing space. We'll take a minute to talk a little bit about traditional versus multi-load metering. With traditional load metering, and we used to do this a lot with our Setra Power Patrol, which is discontinued. Below, a customer sent in a requirement, and we kind of broke out the diagram, and you can see in the blue our 2 3-phase loads. And then in the yellow squares, those are all individual loads that the customer wanted to measure for single-phase loads. When we took a look at this with the customer and we added up how many loads, they were going to need 13 Setra Power Patrols in order to solve this problem and get the data and granularity that they wanted. With that, we had 13 meters, and with CTs in the meter, it's about $700 a piece. So it's about $9,100 list plus all the install. And for any of the electricians out there, wiring that high voltage is the most dangerous part of the installations, no matter what power meter that you're using. So having to do that 13 times becomes pretty costly due to some safety precautions that they may need to take. With multi-load metering in either our 12 or 48 load meters, we have that dual voltage input setup that we talked about, that we can have 477 or 120 or anything, but any combinations between 80 and 600 volts. And we can measure from the building main all the way down to any central large equipment and anything in between to support your energy management strategy. So with 1 meter, we can take 2 different service levels and measure those and map the CTs to those levels. Applying this approach to the same problem, we still had the same number of loads. We still wanted to measure 13 different loads, but now we could do it with 1 meter. So 1 meter with the CTs was around $2,850 for split cores. And now it's $2,850 plus install. So you're already saving, over $6,000 right off the bat for the equipment, plus all the installation savings of not having to land those multiple wires. Now, there are customers who still want 1 meter per 1 load, and we can still fulfill that requirement with our 3-load meter, just like a lot of other suppliers out there. But this multi-load metering approach really lets you get more data for less money, and hopefully enables you to win more jobs out there in the marketplace. So we'll point out a few of the things that are the Setra difference in the meter, and some of the things that hopefully you'll find helpful in the design work that we did for this meter. The first is we wanted to make sure above all that we wanted to be contractor friendly. So we wanted to make sure that the 3 and the 12 load meter were as small as possible. Often submetering is not in the plan from get-go, and there's far more buildings constructed than are being constructed in today's market. So we tried to keep the form factor for the 3 and the 12 as small as possible while still giving you enough room to put wires inside of that enclosure. So that way you could fit to the right, left, top, or bottom of some of these panels. The other thing we heard from contractors is when they get on site, they never really know where their conduit entries need to be. So sometimes they look at a drawing and they should have a trough above and below, and now they have to go left to right for just to tie right into the panel to tap into the lines. So what we did is we developed a rotatable base so we can remove the display so all the data can stay where you can see it. And you can rotate the base so that the conduit entries are either on the left, right, or top and bottom. So you can have more straight conduit runs and reduce the amount of installation time on site and just make it all around easier to make a straight run versus bending pipe within the electrical room to make the conduit land. The other thing was about simplifying installation. So kind of a hidden cost factory within submetering is if you have a meter like our Power Patrol, there was always a cost to installing it within a panel that was often hidden at bid time. So with that, we mean that we used to have a customer buy a separate panel, either a plastic enclosure or metal enclosure. They would buy this enclosure. They would put a backplate in it most of the time, put a DIN rail into it most of the time, snap the Power Patrol in, and all that's before getting to the job site. So what we tried to do is to take out the cost of the panel, the DIN rail, and all the labor for the panel configuration. And we tried to build that into, you can pull the meter out of the box, install it on the wall, and then land your CT in service wiring right to the meter without having to do all that extra work, all that extra cost, and all that extra inventory within your shop. Next was about, we took a lot of pride in making sure that we made a safe meter. The last thing we wanted to hear was someone getting hurt because of something that we designed and make. So when we took a look at some of the feedback from customers on the old Power Patrol, is they'd always have to completely shut down the voltage to the panel because we had this exposed terminal block right at the front of the meter. So there was no cover, there was no safety feature over that terminal block, so you had high voltage right there. So what we did is we tried to make the PCBA frame assembly, that guts of the meter, once it snaps into that housing, it's an IP40 high voltage cover. So all the high voltage is behind that PCBA frame assembly, and you can't get a finger in there, you can't get a tool in there without removing it with a tool. So it's very safe and isolates the contractor doing the high voltage from getting shocked or being some sort of situation that causes an unsafe situation. Improvement, and then you'll have the cover on top of that, which will protect you from any arc flash situations without having to be in an arc flash suit. Looking to the right, one simple thing that we did was move the USB to a place where you could get it without having to de-energize the panel. So if you had to add a load, add a configuration, change something, and you wanted to plug into the front of the meter, you could do so without having to be in an arc flash suit and still be compliant with NFPA 70E. And you can do this because there's double insulation between the high voltage inputs and the meter. So we have the cover, which you can see in the lower left, and then we have the front cover and the display in multiple layers. So it's been approved by UL, so we make sure we meet that double insulation requirement for those arc flash situations. The other thing we wanted to do is there's a lot of handoffs within a metering job. So sometimes there's a separate electrical contractor, there's an integrator, sometimes there's a building owner in there. And what we wanted to do is streamline the installation as well as aid in commissioning. So what we did is we made an installation record that you can generate from the software. And with that installation report, you can get all the information of how that meter was configured through the software, as well as see a snapshot of a measurement value for the CTs and the voltage inputs. And it also gives you a spot to type in some multimeter values. So should you want to measure the amperage or voltage that's coming in, you can do so and type in that comparative value and see how those lined up with your meter for a commissioning phase to make sure everything is hooked up right. Because that's the biggest issue with meters is, what if they're installed right, they're hooked up right, they usually run for just about ever without issue. But the hardest part is making sure everyone's in alignment and the data is going to the right place. So this is something we put in to try to align the stakeholders within the process, as well as give you some commissioning tools to make those corrections right up front. Next was the intuitive configuration software that's on the meter. There's no software to download. Everything is stored on the meter. We applied a halo dot approach, which anything that you want to configure will have one of these halo dots in a various color based on its configured state and selected state. So if you want to configure CT1 on the CT page, you click on it, it'll get this ring around it once you click on it, and that will bring you into the window to make that configuration change. So that's where you would select a part number for 20 amps, 50 amps, one of the Rogos. All the Setra part numbers are stored in there, so you can see all of those values. So you look at the part number, it says CTS 020. You select in the drop down CTS 020, and it will have all the amperage as well as the output of that CT stored in automatically, as well as there's a user configured for the CT as well. But anywhere where you can configure something, be it a pulse input or output, a voltage input, you'll see these halo dots throughout the software. So it's kind of like picking a seat on an airplane. You see what it looks like at the time, you click on it, and then you can configure that input. All right, there I'll pause for any questions that there might be. That concludes the overview of the meter, and then we can jump into software if we have time, depending on how many questions people have.
Again, excellent. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, again, if there's more details that someone needs, please feel free to request that as well for a private one-on-one virtual training of the meter as well with our sales team or myself.
I'll put the product page in the general chat so that anybody on this webinar can click on that. You can request more information. You can request a quote, and you can also request a one-on-one software demo with one of our Setra experts. So yeah, Tom, I think I'll read through some of the questions that came in during the presentation, and if we have a few minutes, we can quickly click through the software. So let's get going. The first question is, so Tom, you mentioned 3, 12, 48 load options. What's the size of the 12 load unit?
It's about 7 inches by 7 inches by 3 7/8 inches deep as far as the form factor.
So it basically looks like the silhouette of the meter that you have up here. I mean, that's so the 48 load is the larger one. The 3 and the 12 are housed in that smaller unit.
Correct.
It's very compact. Okay, so Tom, if you're, let me know if you want me to refer folks to the website, but we had a question come in asking for the MSRP on the unit.
So those, yeah, we will have the ability to do the online ordering shortly, right from the product page. It's going by memory. I think it's around $660 for the 3. Around, I'm probably gonna screw it up if I tell you, so we'll take that and get back to you just so the sales team doesn't get angry at me. But I think it's 2,000 for the 48 and something like 1,300 for the 12, something like that list price.
Okay, and I did put that link that I promised in the chat, so anybody can click on there, request a specific quote. If you have a larger project, obviously, you know, we have discounts, so please feel free to go there, and then you can also schedule a one-on-one software demo if you're interested in that. Tom, I'm going to field another question here. Does the unit display voltage and current as well as power? How about apparent and reactive power, harmonics, transients? What is the resolution of the readings?
So on the, as far as that goes, everything is floating point from the data perspective. It depends how much you can see based on whether you're looking at the meter itself or you're looking through the web portal software as to how many decimal points that you get. But you can see kilowatt hours, you can see kilowatts, you can see peak demand, you can see total harmonic distortion, you can see apparent and displacement power factor. There's probably 40 different things that you can see across the different parameters, so it's pretty comprehensive from the output perspective. If you need more details, we can get those over to you. Also on the data sheet on the product page, it'll have the parameters right on there as well.
Excellent, thanks, Tom. Another question, do you sell direct to customers or work through vendors?
We do both. So we do have business that comes direct, but we also deal with many different integrators and places where you can buy the meters as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to put, again, refer to that link I put in the chat if anybody's interested in learning more or getting a quote direct from Setra. With our showcase going on, you know, any leads that come through, just mention that you were on this webinar, and I will personally make sure it gets to either a sales rep or a Setra expert right away to quickly, you know, get you situated, because we do appreciate your time and joining us here. Tom, I think we have a few minutes. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, this webinar is recorded if you do have to drop off at 30 minutes past, but you know, maybe we can go through a 5-minute or so walkthrough of the software. I just think this is such a huge selling point of the power meter that I want to give it some time.
Sure. So I'm tied into the Power Meter Data Manager, which is the software located on the unit itself. So let me dial in here with my PIN code. So from here, the web portal software is split into a sidebar for navigation. So you have setup, and then you have kind of informational for different trending things that you can look at, event logs, alarm status below there. Across the top is a communication bar. So this communication bar will let you log out, reload the configuration before you save it. If you mistyped and screwed something up, you can click reload and it will bring that back. And it'll also say upload to meter here once you've made a change that you want to upload to the meter. I'll navigate through a few screens here just so you can see what it looks like. If I go to voltage inputs, you can see the halo dot that I mentioned in the presentation and the 2 voltage inputs. And you can see as I switch those, you can see the halo switch and you can see the setup change. And you can see the actual voltage reading right there on the voltage setup. We do allow for potential transformers, so you can put in a voltage scaler for that transformer to make sure your power and energy data is correct based on what's before the potential transformer. Next, we have a load setup. So you can name the load something that means something to you. And we also number the loads in order that they are added to the meter. and you can see the voltage input that it's referenced to, whether be it 1 or 2, based on how it's hooked up in that particular panel, as well as you can see the different CTs that are tied to that specific load, depending on what type of load that it is. On the CT inputs, here you can see the, this is a 12 load meter, so you can see the 12 CT inputs, and you can click on the CT inputs and see the information of how they're tied. You can see the drop down for the CT type, so the CT PF12, so this is a Rogowski coil part number, and all the parameters are configured here within that meter. You can also correct the polarity of the CT. So if you find out later that one was installed backwards and you were getting negative energy readings and power readings, you can come in here and flip the CT correction without having to go back into that panel. Communications, this is where you'll set your BACnet or Modbus parameters, as well as your network settings. Pulse inputs, so you can see there are 2 pulse inputs, and then we have 1 pulse output. So you can configure those for whatever meter's coming into the unit, as well as any accumulating value. We have quite a bit of alarming that you can put on your meter. So you can add an alarm, and there's many different alarms that you can set. These alarms will both act locally on the meter. You'll be able to see them through the web portal. And if you're using BACnet, you'll see them as event notifications. With Modbus, there's not really an alarming part of that protocol, but with BACnet, you'll be able to see those over the BACnet network. The installation report, this is what we mentioned during the presentation, so you can fill out as much of this as you want. You can take a snapshot of the real value that's going on within the meter. And in this column is where you can type in the measured multimeter values. So if you wanted to compare that you actually were seeing 122 or 122.01 or 244 and different amperage at the CT levels, you can save that snapshot so that that'll be kind of proof of your commissioning within there. In power analytics, you can see some light trend data. So this is our odometer, so you can see for this load for last hour, last day, last week, last month. You can see live power data, and then you can see accumulated energy data across this. So this will give you a snapshot, and you can also export that data for that load into a CSV file that you can use. You also have event logs, alarm status for anything that's set. You have a system page where you can update the firmware version, do factory resets, reset your trend data, anything like that will be on the system page. On the export configuration, this is where you can export that installation report. So you can type in the user who's generating that report, and the meter will generate a PDF of that installation report, as you can see here, that has all the configuration data and anything that's set up within that meter. And you can also, here's where you can do the clone and import of that meter setup that we talked about. So you can export the setup, it'll save it as a JSON file, and then you can import the different aspects of the meter, import meter setup that you want to other meters that may be similar across the campus or across the jobs. And we also, lastly, we have a help menu, which has all your data sheets, quick start guides, your manual, your BACnet object list, and your Modbus register list. All those are stored on the meter. You don't have to be in a spot where there is web access in order to gain access to those. So that's a quick overview of the software. And again, I'm happy, our sales team is happy to do any one-on-one more in depth of the software or the meter itself, or talk to you about any jobs that you have.
Thanks, Tom. That was a great overview of the software. And again, I'd encourage anyone who wants to learn more, as Tom said, to visit the product page and fill out the form there. Again, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but we did have a couple more questions that came through. So maybe we can answer those quickly before we wrap up. Feel free to put any additional questions you might have in the questions box. If we can't get to them live, we'll certainly follow up individually to make sure any questions you might have get answered. Tom, are fuses built into the voltage feed local to the meter, or would external fuses be required?
So that all depends on the specification, as if their external ones would be required for that locality. But we do have a 200 KAIC fuse that is in the voltage path to protect the meter from any surges. So there won't be anything coming to or from the meter that would cause damage in any sort of situation. Usually something else will blow much before that fuse will blow to protect the meter. So I won't say you never need them, because certain times they're part of a spec and someone demands that they're there for fuse leads, but for the most part, our meter does not require them as long as you have a disconnect breaker. So.
And one last question here before we wrap up. Is it possible to get a report for monthly kilowatt usage?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to access that. One is through the odometer. So if you picture this load 1 was, a building or an apartment, or the total usage within that space that you were going to bill, you can get the kilowatt hours that were used in the last month. So in this last month, you can see it's from December 18th to January 18th. And you can set that billing day from 1 to 28 on the general settings page. So if your electric bill is generated on the 15th or the 7th or something like that, for the month, it'll ban that last month data in that, so that you can see that. The other way is you can export the data into a CSV file, and then you'll have all the information of all the data in spikes. So if you're looking for specific information or time windows, you can do that through Excel as well. And a lot of energy management software interfaces that are out there will have that capability as well.
Right, we'll wrap it up there. Again, as a reminder, this webinar was recorded. We'll make that available shortly after that recording processes, if you want to come back and view anything for a second time. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate everyone's time and to stay a little bit extra to get these questions answered and to take a look at the software. Thanks also to you, Tom, for taking the time out of your day to present. I want to remind everybody, if you've been joining us through the virtual showcase that we have going on today, we have one more live webinar event at 3 p.m. Eastern time, where we'll be going over some of our critical environments products and how Setra has created HVAC products specifically for COVID-19. Some of you might be familiar with our room pressure monitors. Those have been a huge part of the COVID response over the last year. We also have some new products that are really exciting. So if you're just interested in that, or if you think you might have some applications, please join that at 3 p.m. Thanks again, Tom. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks everyone.